we are in the middle of spring state championships, but we are going to kind of take a little bit of a detour in the conversation because the headline, we got winning bets and not necessarily wagers, but bet sisters. Lauren and Sienna, part of that UCLA women's basketball team that beat South Carolina last night to capture the NCAA Women's National Championship. Lauren was named the tournament's most outstanding player. She had herself a day yesterday, scoring 14 points, grabbing 11 rebounds, also had 2 assists and 2 blocks. Sienna comes off the bench for the Bruins, played 7 minutes, 4 key rebounds through the course of the win. And it was just good to see from the Grandview alums, right? You and I both watched Lauren and Sienna win state championships for the Wolves. The shot that we just flashed on screen, your picture from, I believe that was the 2023 state championship game. Sienna won it, and the first thing she did was run over to the boards where big sister Lauren, and I don't know if Lauren was at UCLA at that point or if she was coming off her first year at Stanford, because she started at Stanford, transferred to UCLA. But we spotted Lauren early in that game, and it was awesome to see the embrace between the sisters when Sienna was able to get the Wolves to the 6A state championship. I think we were doing 6A stuff at that time. So I was kind of poking around a little bit, Dougie. Lauren is projected to be a top 5 pick in the WNBA draft per CBSSports.com. They have her going to the Washington Mystics. And I don't know if she would be. I got to check back. This is where I didn't have time to do the research, but that's going to be one of the highest selections ever for a Colorado high school product.
Yeah, it's got to be. I'm trying to think of some of the others, and some of the other ones came, in the early days of the WNBA, so it wasn't as probably systematic as it is now with scouting, and that's impressive to be a top 5 pick. A little birdie told me that those girls might make more in NIL than they will in the WNBA. So come on, WNBA, let's go, let's pick it up.
So your last first round pick, and your only other first round pick actually from a Colorado high school product. Let me see if this sounds familiar. Grandview alum, UCLA standout, Michaela Onyenware.
Mm-hmm.
Number 6 overall to the New York Liberty.
Yeah, I remember we talked about her, when we were talking about Brianna Crittenden breaking an all-time record and some of the great players that have come through. Onyenware is a heck of a player, and top 10 pick. I didn't necessarily realize that until you just said it, but that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, credit to the chassanow.com database on the WNBA draft history for Colorado high school players. So, all right, so 2 questions I want to get in here because I was really looking into the Bet Sisters and UCLA winning the national title. I was hanging out a little bit in downtown Colorado Springs, walking home, not a long walk for me, and just kind of gave me some time to bounce some things around in my head. First question I want to ask you is, although she's been gone from the high school scene for a long time, I want to say Lauren graduated. She might have graduated in 2020, the year that COVID hit.
Right.
What is her place right now in terms of being the best or greatest in girls basketball, one of the best or greatest girls basketball players in state history? And the caveat that I would throw at you is I would consider the best and the greatest to be 2 very different things. So that's kind of where I want to pick your brain when you think about what do you think about when it comes to Lauren?
I think here's one of my kind of side tangents on this topic, but I think when you're talking about the sport of basketball, your bigs are always going to get overlooked. They just play, and especially the Bet sisters, they played with such a steady pace, and they were always around the bucket, always getting, rebounds and easy buckets, but they also had such a great presence in the post, such a high level of skill in the post. I think that those types of points come with fewer highlights. When you're talking about Brianna Crittenden, for example, who graces our new cover, her highlights are exciting. She's playing a slasher role. She's shooting deep threes. She's cutting to the basket and creating shots. And that's not to say that either of the Betts girls did not do that or could not do that, but I tend to think they were just so steady. They had a presence both on offense and defense because of their size and because of the impact that they had on the game. So I think that you have to put them very high up in terms of the best. And I'm not sure. I'm going to let you go off on your, difference between best and greatest, but what those two sisters did for their school has to be considered, especially if you're including winning into this conversation. I think when I think of the best players that have ever played in Colorado, I think of Abby Wayner, probably first and foremost.
Mm-hmm.
I think Brianna Crittenden has to be in that conversation. We talked on one of the shows earlier in the year. It'd be fun to watch those two players play each other in their prime because I think they were similar in terms of just the skill set and ability to hit mid-range, long range. I'm trying to think. Gosh, I mean, there's been a lot, but those are the two that kind of stand out. And then you have, the Betts sisters. I don't know how you don't put them on that list. Ann Struther's another one I should have mentioned earlier that I think just the level of skill that she brought to the game. And she was kind of one of those, I wouldn't say she was a pioneer because you had Tracy Hill that could score the basketball so well. Mm-hmm. But Ann Struther was nationally recognized. And she was another one that went immediately from Colorado to a UConn program that was always a national contender. If memory serves, she also played in the WNBA. I don't remember where her draft slot was, but certainly accomplished. So in my mind, it's kind of a, say, 5 or 6 girls that I put into my best of all time in Colorado. It's Wayner, it's Crittenden, it's both of the Betts sisters and Ann Struther. And then you could also throw in Tracy Hill as far as just a pure scorer, someone who could just score the basketball and did a lot of things before there was an NBA, a WNBA, and really before there was even, I would say before college basketball was even as prominent as it is now. I'd throw in, those 6 as far as kind of just, you can debate all you want for who's number 1 versus who's number 6 and everybody in between. I'd even throw in Tanya Have of Evergreen, a tremendous player that wound up at Tennessee and won an awful lot there. Again, she played a lot of professional basketball. I believe she played in Australia before there was such a thing as a WNBA. So, if you want to go with your top 7, I think you'd put those 7 in. And I know that that's riding the fence, adding who's the best, but I think you literally could make a debate for any of the 7.
Yeah. And it's one of those things where there's no wrong answer probably in this. Right.
I will say, I still go back to this though. Bigs in basketball, they just don't get their credit. They affect the game so much. And from watching both of the Betts girls play in state championships, they just had an impact on every possession offensively and defensively. Because of their size, because of what they meant to the middle of that defense and how they had to be respected in the post and double team. I mean, every single possession, those girls impacted the game.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm trying to put this into the proper context because I think if we're trying to use some decent data points to identify, like, what does the best mean, and for me, I think we always go back, right? And you said her name right off the top of your list is Abby Wayner. I think a lot of people would regard Abby as potentially the best girls basketball player in Colorado history overall. She would get a lot of number 1 votes. And I think if I was voting on something like this, I actually think I would put Lauren first. And a part of that is she was just utterly dominant when she was at Grandview, right? She made life miserable for a lot of other players in the state. And you got to remember, she was the #1 overall recruit in the nation for her class. Like, and that's a really hard thing to overlook, right? And not only that, this is going to kind of lead into the second part of this whole discussion that I want to get into, but she backed it up. She helped the team to a national title, and she won the most outstanding player. Like for her class,
what more can you ask?
Right. And I think, looking at legacies and looking at greatness, which is kind of part 2 of this question, something like this is definitely going to help her case, right? But I think just on pure talent, skill, and accolades alone, I think in a couple of years, and last week I was preaching a lot because we saw, we were talking about Oliver Horton and some of those standout track results, appreciate the greatness that we have that's happening right in front of us. And this kind of, ties into that a little bit, because I'm not quite sure. It's hard for me to think back to that time, because so much was happening, not just with, high school sports, but the world. Like, did we appreciate Lauren for the basketball talent that she was at that time? And that's a tough one. But I just think given, nothing she did this weekend, elevated that status for her from the high school standpoint, right? Her high school resume speaks for itself. But I think now that we are far enough removed and being able to see how she continued her career, I actually think if you were going to ask me who the best high school girls basketball player in state history is, I think my answer would be Lauren Betts.
I think it's a really good answer, and it's very well thought out in terms of accolades, living up to expectation, all those things that you outlined. I think the tricky thing for me, and maybe something that when anyone's having this debate has to put out on the table, who is the best as a Colorado high school player, or who is the best when you look at their body of work afterward? Because take for example, this girls discussion, I believe both Abby and Ann won national championships. I believe. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure they both did. And I'm not positive, but I want to say that Tanya Have won one at Tennessee also. So, I mean, like they all lived up to expectation. On the guys' side, I think it's a really obvious answer when anybody says who's the greatest boys basketball player to ever play. Most people say Chauncey Billups. Well, Chauncey's body of work, both in college and professionally, is tremendous. But I think if you're really looking at it, is it a whole lot different than Derrick White, who has had a tremendous NBA career? No one thought of Derrick White as one of the best players to ever come out of Colorado, but he's certainly become that. I think, if you're looking at, it was funny, we play the old man's pickup game before the state finals. One of the guys that played in that game said, even at the time, Chauncey wasn't the best basketball player in the state. It was Johnny Reese, which guy I played against at Manual. Johnny Reese was tremendous, one of the all-time greatest basketball players that's ever come out of Colorado. Won 3 out of 4 state championships, started as a freshman on a team that featured Chucky Sprawling at Manual. Just a tremendous player. He didn't go on to have necessarily as decorated of a college career as say Chauncey or Derrick White, but while he was in high school, he was one of the greatest players I've ever seen. So I think it's a fun debate. It's ripe for defining how you're measuring greatness. And if it's, hey, what did they do as a senior in high school? That's a different conversation compared to what have they done in all their years. And I think, the Chauncey Derrick White thing is a really good example of that, because no one, no matter how good of a prognosticator were you could ever say that Derrick White was one of the best players to ever come out of Colorado. He is now, but at the time, no one said that.
Right. And so that actually leads me to the second part of this discussion is, what does, winning a collegiate national championship or something like that do ultimately for a player's high school legacy? And do we kind of use that to inflate what they were as a high school player?
Certainly. I think, again, Derrick is the best example. I mean, look, there's no knock on a kid that's a late bloomer. I mean,
No.
not only did we not know about Derrick White when he was in high school, but neither did any college. I mean, he wound up going to UCCS, and granted, he excelled there. He did what he needed to do there, but he bloomed later. I don't think that takes anything away from him as a high school player. I think it just makes his story more unique that he blossomed later.
Yep. And so I want to bring up a couple of points, and you rattled off a couple of them. I mean, Derrick White being one of them, but like we look at that class of 2019 in girls basketball, because you had Ashton, Prechtel, Fran Belibi, and Jana Van Gytenbeek. We famously had them on the cover of the Preps issue in 2022. They were all at Stanford, and they won the national championship in 2021. The three of them were contributors on that team. Ashton was the only one who actually got drafted into the NBA, or into the WNBA. But when I think back about that, I mean, the one that actually stands out to me, a couple of things. Fran was dunking, felt like every week, right? So her legacy as a high school.
It was the Flash for sure.
Yeah. And Jana Van Gytenbeek, that Cherry Creek team in 2019 that won the state title, I think she made that game-winning shot either around or above Lauren Betts. And
I don't remember over whom, but I do remember that she was the one that hit the shot.
And she attacked the basket. And that was the key. That's why I want to say it might have been around or over Lauren. And I'm sorry if I'm not trying to knock anyone, but and it's one of those moments where I would say Jana Van Gytenbeek, for that accomplishment for Cherry Creek, who had gone so long without a girls, like, she might be one of the greatest girls high school basketball players, not because of statistics or anything, but because of legacy, and then adding it to what she, Fran, and Ashton were able to do and go win a national title for Stanford. Lauren was committed to that Stanford team. She was, very much, I think she was very close with that group of girls, and then ultimately ended up going to UCLA, and Sienna joined her. But when you look at other players across the board, right, does anything that Christian McCaffrey has done from the professional or even the collegiate level when he was a Heisman Trophy finalist, he certainly didn't need to do that to bolster his high school resume, right? Because he was...
I would actually argue that he did, because in my mind, Christian McCaffrey was the greatest player that we as Coloradans had seen in quite some time. We thought he was. Nationally, I think people questioned it. I think coaches near and far wanted to turn him into a safety. It's not PC to say, but no one ever views, he's going to be the next great white running back. But that's exactly what he was. And it doesn't matter what color the guy was. He was in phenomenal running back at every level. And kudos for him, because the story that I always heard, and maybe I don't have it right, but I always heard that CU essentially wasn't too high on him because he didn't want to turn into a DB or a safety. And so he said, fine, I'll go to Stanford. And then he should have won the Heisman Trophy. He did it all. He was a tremendous player, special teams, receiving the ball, running the ball. He did everything that everyone that ever doubted him said he couldn't do. And then he went on and did all that same stuff in the pros. And he's a gold jacket, Canton Hall of Famer, no doubt in my mind. So I think, the fact that we thought he was great in Colorado was wonderful, and we never doubted him. But around the country, I don't think anybody saw or expected Christian McCaffrey to do what he's done.
Right. So I guess the context I want to frame this in, and then we're going to rattle off a couple more examples. But if you were sitting in the discussion room picking a CHSAA Hall of Fame class, do you need Christian McCaffrey being an all-pro NFL running back to help make his case as a student participant for the CHSAA Hall of Fame? My answer would be no.
He was great all 4 years.
Right.
Great. Not even debatably great.
Right. Do you need to do that with someone like Nate Solder because he protected Tom Brady's blindside?
I would say yes, and I would only say that because people look. He came to CU as a tight end, so people did kind of know him as a pass catcher in high school because he was a really big athletic kid. But what he evolved into, including while he was at CU, is the stuff of legend. And then, yeah, he goes on to win. I don't even know how many Super Bowls protecting Tom Brady.
He might have just gotten one.
Really?
One or two. I don't think he got as many because he wasn't part of that like dynasty run.
But he was in more than that, right?
He might have been in more than that. Yeah.
I mean, just either way, tremendous player, and in just an all-pro season in, season out. I mean, I think he did need to do what he did to add to his legacy.
Okay. Wyndham Clark winning the U.S. Open. Is that something that boosts his profile as a high school golfer?
I would say I couldn't tell you what he did. I want to say he won state championships. And
he won a state championship.
This one, I know he was featured in Mile High Sports Magazine as a prep. I think he was one of our high school athlete of the year candidates. So we always believed, hey, this kid is special. But you win a major, that's on another level. And I think it fair or not, I think people look back and go, they may not reinvent someone's high school career, but I certainly think they go, that's cool that he came from Valor Christian.
Yep. And so then I would make the same argument for someone like Jennifer Kupcho, who was very, very good in high school and winning. I think it was the Chevron or whatever that odd fifth major is for the women, kind of boosts her profile.
Take Kupcho, for example. Would you say that she was better, equal, or not as good as somebody like Haley Shaw, who was dominant her entire high school career, but hasn't necessarily had the post career accomplishments that Kupcho's had? It doesn't make either one of them, doesn't change their high school career at all.
Senior year Jennifer Kupcho versus freshman year Haley Shaw is an 18-hole match I would have really, really enjoyed watching.
Both phenomenal.
Yeah. You mentioned Derrick White, right? I would actually say like Derrick White's high school basketball career was, he's never someone I've never really jumped into the numbers on. It was good, but what he will do in the NBA would be the entire reason that if he were to go into something like the CHSAA Hall of Fame or the Colorado Sports Hall of Fame, it's what he's done really at the NBA level that would fuel that.
For sure. I mean, as great and as highly as we hold Chauncey, I think Derrick's accomplishments in the NBA are already pushing what Chauncey did. And Chauncey's a Hall of Famer. Mm-hmm. Will Derrick White become a Hall of Famer? I think if he wins another title, he probably is. He's been super good, really, really good.
Yeah. Very, very undervalued coming out of college, I would say.
Yeah.
And then the last one I had was Luke Hochevar. As a Kansas City Royals guy, you should know a little bit about Luke. And, for if someone were to ask you, where do you play high school baseball, Doug, what would your answer be? I'm putting you on the spot.
No, Golden.
No. Fowler. He's from Southeast Colorado.
That's right.
And I'll tell you, because he played baseball. He played a lot of club baseball with my brother Noel. And Luke was good. Luke was really good. He was good from the time he went to Tennessee. He was good from the time he got into the major leagues when he was the number 1 overall pick, I want to say, for the Dodgers. But Luke was a good baseball player. But because he went to Fowler, he was a 2A player of the year at the time when Fowler was really good. But he probably, if someone was going to discuss him for a CHSAA Hall of Fame type situation, I think being the winning pitcher in Game 7 of the World Series is probably something that pushes him over the top.
Yeah, for sure. And baseball is an interesting one because you have these, number one, you have kids in a spring sport, which we've talked about a lot on the show recently, that generally tend to get, I don't want to say overlooked, but compared to, say, football or basketball, they just don't get the attention because it's spring sports. And just human nature, people are checked out. They're not paying nearly as close attention. So I don't think that baseball players, by and large, get the same amount of attention as a good football player or a good basketball player. I could be told differently, and I would be okay with that, but that's just my opinion. But you look at some of the great baseball players, and then what happens to a baseball player is that even if we do know them, they're great in high school. They either go to college or they go to the minors, and then they kind of disappear for 3 or 4 years because, let's be honest, very few people pay attention to college baseball, especially in Colorado, and very even fewer pay attention to minor league baseball. So these guys that come out of the state that are great, and then they all of a sudden one day they're on a huge stage in the majors, and we go, oh yeah, that kid's from Colorado. I mean, think of all. I mean, Danny Jackson from I believe he was Aurora Central. You've got
how about David Bodie from Faith Christian?
David Bodie from Faith Christian, and a really good one. I mean,
Brandon McCarthy, Cheyenne Mountain, a lot of them.
Yeah, Lamar's had a couple. I think blanking on the most famous one,
Scott Ellerton.
Ellerton. I mean, he was a great player. Even Gosman, he pitched in the World Series, I believe, a couple different times now.
Yeah, for Grandview.
Yeah. So. I mean, and that's a guy that, like, right or wrong, again, I don't know that not many people know that he's a Colorado kid, but he's been on huge stages. So, I mean, Mark Knutson, North Glen graduate, started opening day in 1993, I believe. I mean, the list goes on about guys that have kind of had great baseball careers in Colorado and then fall off the radar. And then all of a sudden you go, hey, that kid's from Colorado, when they're pitching the World Series.
Yeah. You mentioned Mark Knutson from North Glen High School. We're going to be surrounded. It's a Norse dominated show today because we're going to get into some magazine content after this. We're starting off with the way that the magazine leads in, Doug. We're going to start off with your dad. And for that, we're going to bring in a friend of yours who penned a really, really nice column last month. And that is DenverSports.com's digital editor, James Marilat. And he joins us right after this.